The Vorthak battlecruiser Scythe of the First Blood hung in the void, like a blade poised to strike. Its silver-purple hull absorbed the dim starlight, the dark steel plating etched with the scars of 100 victorious campaigns. Commander Vorgel stood on the command platform, his four-fingered hands clasped behind his back, watching the tactical display with cold amusement. Before them, drifting in the silence of deep space, was the human vessel. It was a pitiful thing, boxy, asymmetrical, its hull a patchwork of welded plates and exposed conduits. No sleek curves, no shimmering energy fields, no elegant weapon arrays, just blunt, ugly pragmatism. The Vorthak had seen this pattern before. Primitive species, barely out of their gravity wells, cobbling together their first crude attempts at interstellar travel. They always failed. Analysis. Vorgel rumbled, his voice a deep vibration in the dense atmosphere of the bridge. Gromnock, the lead scientist, tapped a clawed finger against the holographic readout. Primitive fusion drive. No energy shielding. Armor composition suggests basic titanium alloys, laughably thin by our standards. Weapon signatures indicate chemical, propelled projectiles, and low-yield plasma emitters. He snorted, a dismissive ripple passing through his crest of metallic spines. They are children playing with fire. Vorgel exhaled through his nasal slits, the sound carrying the weight of centuries of Vorthak superiority. The humans had been a curiosity at first, a young, reckless species expanding too fast, too chaotically. The High Council had debated whether to absorb them into the Dominion or simply erase them before they became a nuisance. Now, seeing this pathetic vessel, the answer seemed obvious. "Open a channel," Vorgel ordered. The comm officer hesitated. "Commander, protocol dictates we first." "I do not require protocol," Vorgel cut in. "I require obedience." The holographic display flickered, and a human face appeared. Commander Janet Torres, her dark eyes sharp despite the grainy transmission. She stood rigid, her uniform a dull gray, lacking the regalia of a true warrior. "Vorthak vessel," she said, her voice steady. "This is the UNS Resolute. You are in sovereign human space. State your intentions." Vorgel's mandibles twitched in amusement. Sovereign space. As if these apes could claim anything. "You trespass where you do not belong," he replied, the translator rendering his words into their crude tongue. "Your species is weak. Your technology is a relic. You will submit to inspection, or you will be removed." Torres didn't flinch. "Inspection denied. Turn your ship around." A ripple of disbelief passed through the Vorthak bridge. Did she truly believe she could command them? Vorgel gestured to his weapons officer. "Disable their engines. Let them drift until they learn humility." The scythe of the First Blood hummed as its primary plasma lances charged, the silver-purple energy coiling like serpents ready to strike. The humans had no shields, no countermeasures. This would be over in seconds. Then the Resolute moved, not with the sluggishness of a primitive vessel, but with terrifying precision. Its thrusters flared, not in retreat, but in a sharp lateral burn, straight into the blind spot of the Vorthak's targeting array. Gromnock's spine stiffened. Impossible, their acceleration curves. "Fire," Vorgel snarled. The plasma lances seared through the void, and missed. The human ship wasn't just dodging, it was predicting their firing solutions. Then the Resolute returned fire, not with the sluggish plasma bolts they expected, but with a storm of hypervelocity slugs, railgun rounds moving at a fraction of light speed. The Vorthak shields flared violet as they absorbed the impacts, but the sheer volume of fire was staggering. The humans weren't just shooting, they were saturating their target. Vorgel's claws dug into the command console. This wasn't a battle. This was a message. And for the first time in his long, victorious life, the Vorthak commander felt something unfamiliar. The Resolute hung in the void like a predator circling wounded prey. Its hull, pitted and scarred from centuries of service, should have been a relic, a laughable artifact of human stubbornness. Yet now, under the cold scrutiny of Vorthak sensors, it pulsed with something far more dangerous than sleek alien alloys. Gromnock's talons trembled over the data feeds. The human ship's armor wasn't just thick, it was layered, a patchwork of welded plates and reactive shielding that defied conventional analysis. Some sections bore the pockmarks of ancient kinetic strikes, their surfaces fused into grotesque scars. Others gleamed with fresh ceramite, hastily applied over wounds still bleeding coolant. This wasn't a warship, it was a palimpsest. Every dent a battle survived, every weld a refusal to die. Vorgel's mandibles clicked in agitation. The Vorthak Dominion had crushed 1,000 species beneath their silver-purple fleets. Their technology was perfection, brutal, efficient, honed by eons of conquest. Yet this thing before them moved with a feral cunning no tactical algorithm could replicate. The Resolute banked again, its thrusters flaring in short, controlled bursts. Not the graceful arcs of Vorthak vessels, but jagged, unpredictable maneuvers, like a beast dodging through terrain. It knew by instinct. Gromnock's neural tendrils flickered with alarm. Their navigation systems, speak, Vorgil snapped. Their course corrections, they're not calculated, they're improvised. A cold ripple passed through the command deck. No species should have been able to process combat variables at such speeds without AI mediation. Yet the humans did. Their ship twisted through the kill zone like a living thing, its crew reacting faster than thought. Then the Resolute fired again. This time, the railgun slugs came in staggered volleys, each impact timed to strike the same weakened shield quadrant. The Vorthak barriers flared violet, their energy cores overheating as they struggled to disperse the kinetic fury. Vorgel's claws flexed. This was no accident. The humans weren't just attacking, they were learning. A proximity alert shrieked. Something detached from the Resolute, not a missile, but a jagged, angular pod wreathed in primitive chemical thrusters. It spiraled toward them, its hull marked with faded insignia. Un-S Vanguard, decommissioned Fae, Gromnock's spines flattened. A boarding craft, but the pod's thrusters sputtered, its trajectory wobbling like a drunkard's stumble. Yet somehow, impossibly, it corrected, slamming into the Vorthak hull with a resonance that shuddered through the deck. The outer cameras flickered to life, revealing the pod's hatch peeling open like a rusted jaw. And inside, not drones, not machines, clad in armor so old its polymer layers had yellowed, their visors fogged with age, their weapons, crude ballistic rifles, should have been museum pieces. Yet they moved with a fluid, terrifying purpose, their boots magnetizing to the Vorthak hull as they advanced. Vorgel's blood ran cold. These weren't soldiers, they were ghosts. The lead figure, its helmet marked with a single faded stripe, raised a gauntleted fist. The squad behind it halted in perfect unison. Then, with a burst of static, a voice crackled through the Vorthak comms. "This is Captain Stephen Kim, United Nations Expeditionary Force." The words were slow, deliberate, as if dredged from a dead language. "You are trespassing in sovereign human space." Gromnock's tendrils coiled tight. The translation matrix had flagged something. An anomaly in the vocal patterns. That voice wasn't just speaking, it was recorded. Vorgil stared at the feed, his instincts screaming. These humans weren't just defying them, they were repeating history. The Vorthak command deck was silent, save for the low hum of their warship's core. The air tasted metallic, thick with the ozone of active weapon systems, but Vorgil barely noticed. His claws flexed against the armrest of his command throne, the edges scraping faintly against the dark steel. On the central display, the human figures stood frozen, their postures rigid, their weapons held with a familiarity that spoke of lifetimes spent in war. Their armor was pitted, scarred by impacts that should have vaporized them. Yet here they were. Gromnock's tendrils flicked across his console, his violet eyes narrowing as the translation matrix spat out another warning. "Commander," he hissed, his voice barely audible over the ship's ambient growl. "Their transmission, it's not just a recording, it's a loop." Vorgil didn't respond immediately. His gaze remained locked on the lead human, Captain Stephen Kim. If the translation was accurate, the name meant nothing to him, but the way the human stood, chin raised, rifle braced, sent an instinctive ripple of unease through his spine. This wasn't a greeting, this was a warning. The humans had known they were coming. Gromnock's claws tapped at the console, pulling up the deep scan results. The data shimmered in the air, silver, purple glyphs flickering as they rearranged themselves. "Their armor," he muttered. "It's not just plating. It's layered with something. Reactive. Our scans can't penetrate it." Vorgil exhaled slowly, his secondary eyelids flicking shut for a fraction of a second. The Vorthak had encountered species with adaptive defenses before. Bio-armor that hardened under fire, alloys that self-repaired. But this was different. The humans weren't just resisting scans. They were hiding. A soft chime echoed through the deck, an alert from the long-range sensors. Vorgil's head snapped toward the display as a new signal resolved itself on the edge of their detection grid. No, not just a ship. The vessel was ancient, its hull a jagged silhouette against the void, its outline broken by gaping wounds where armor had been torn away. It drifted, lifeless, its engines dark. But the design was unmistakable. Gromnock's breath caught. "That's impossible." Vorgil's claws dug deeper into the armrest. The wreck was centuries old at least, maybe older. Yet the humans standing on the hull of their own vessel wore the same markings, the same battered armor. A cold realization settled over him. This wasn't a first contact. This was a reunion. The humans had been here before, and something had killed them. The lead human. Kim tilted his helmet slightly, as if listening to something only he could hear. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, he raised his rifle. Not in threat. Behind him, the rest of the squad mirrored the gesture, their weapons lifting in eerie unison. And then, without another word, they turned, as one, and marched back into the shadows of their ship. The air on the Vorthak deck was thick with silence. Gromnock finally spoke, his voice hollow. "They weren't talking to us." Vorgil didn't need to ask who the humans had been addressing. The wreck drifting in the void was answer enough. Somewhere, in the depths of time, the Vorthak had met humanity before, and humanity remembered. The silence on the Vorthak command deck was absolute. Vorgil's claws flexed against the steel of his console, the faint scrape of talons on metal, the only sound in the oppressive stillness. His secondary eyelids flicked shut for a moment, shielding his vision from the harsh silver-purple glow of the tactical displays. The humans had retreated back into their vessel, a ship that until moments ago he had dismissed as a crude relic. Now, he wasn't so sure. The wreckage floating in the void beyond the viewport was ancient, older than the Vorthak's first recorded spacefaring era. Its architecture was brutal, utilitarian, lines too sharp, angles too aggressive, the unmistakable signature of a species that built for war and nothing else. And yet, the humans had recognized it. Not just recognized it, honored it. Gromnock's sensor array chimed softly, the sound like a knife through the tension. The scientist's frill, normally a vibrant display of status, was clamped tight against his skull, his violet-tinged skin dull with unease. His claws danced over the console, pulling up fragmented data from the wreck's energy signatures. "This isn't possible," he murmured, more to himself than to Vorgil. The commander didn't respond. He didn't need to. The evidence was there, etched into the very metal of the derelict ship. The same markings, the same armor, the same brutal efficiency in design. The humans had been here before, and they had left this behind, a warning, a grave, or something worse. Vorgil's gaze flicked to the human vessel, still drifting, still silent. Its hull was pitted with scars, its armor layered in ways that suggested not just defense, but adaptation. Every dent, every scorch mark told a story. And then, without warning, the human ship moved. Not with the sluggish, mechanical response of a lesser species vessel, not with the predictable thrust of ion drives or plasma burners. It shifted. A ripple passed through its structure, the dark alloy of its hull flexing like muscle beneath skin. The engines, previously dormant, flared to life, but not with the harsh discharge of Vorthak power cores. Instead, a deep resonant hum pulsed through the void, vibrating through the deck plates beneath Vorgel's feet. Gromnock's claws froze over the console. "They're not using reactors," he breathed. Vorgel's spine stiffened. "Explain." The scientist's voice was hollow. "That sound, it's not from an energy source. It's biological." A cold weight settled in Vorgel's chest. The humans hadn't just built their ship. They had grown it, and now it was waking up. The hum deepened, resonating through the Vorthak vessel, like the first stirrings of a predator. The human ship's weapons, previously hidden beneath its armored plates, began to unfold. Not with the mechanical precision of automated turrets, but with the slow, deliberate motion of something alive. Railgun housings flexed like tendons. Plasma conduits pulsed with rhythmic light. And then, from the depths of the human vessel, a single transmission cut through the silence, not a threat. It echoed through the Vorthak's comm systems, raw and unfiltered, a sound that bypassed language and struck straight into the primal core of the brain. "Remember." The wreck in the void shuddered. And then, for the first time in millennia, its engines ignited, and burning with vengeance. Section Fey, the laugh dies. The Vorthak command deck flickered under the sudden wash of blue light. Vorgel's claws dug into the armrests of his throne, the alloy groaning under the pressure. His secondary eyelids snapped shut, then open again, as if hoping the sight before him would change. It didn't. The human ship, no, the thing they had mistaken for a ship, was moving. Not with the mechanical precision of thrusters or the controlled burn of ion drives. It flexed. Great armored plates shifted like the scales of some leviathan rousing from slumber, revealing veins of pulsating energy beneath. The wreck they had dismissed as primitive now loomed before them, not as a relic, but as a predator stretching its limbs after an eternity of stillness. Gromnock's sensor array screamed. The scientist's frill, normally a calm, rippling silver, flared violent violet as data cascaded across his screens. His voice, when it came, was a strangled hiss. "It's not just alive, it's hungry." The words slithered through the bridge, carried on a wave of static from the human transmission. That single, reverberating command, "Remember," still echoed in their bones, a sound that bypassed translation matrices and scraped directly against instinct. Vorgel's warriors shifted uneasily, their weapon, arms twitching. The Vorthak were not a species accustomed to fear. They had crushed empires beneath their tread, reduced worlds to smoldering husks for daring to defy them. But this was something older, something that should not exist, and yet it did. The human vessel's engines, if they could even be called that, ignited. Not the controlled flare of plasma, but a cold blue fire that writhed, tendrils of energy lashing out like the limbs of some deep-sea horror. The light cast jagged shadows across the Vorthak command deck, painting the crew in stark relief, their silver-purple armor suddenly dull against the unnatural glow. Then, the ship spoke again, not through comms, not through any frequency the Vorthak could trace. It spoke through the void itself. The stars rippled. Space twisted, warping around the human vessel in a way that made Gromnock's instruments shriek in protest. The scientist's claws trembled over the controls, his frill now a sickly, pulsing gray. "They're not just using gravity drives," he whispered. "They're bending it. Like folding cloth." A tactical display flickered to life, Before Vorgul, the human ship was changing. Sections of its hull peeled back, revealing structures that defied classification, organic curves fused with brutal, angular weapon mounts, living tissue woven through steel, and at its heart something pulsed, a core of seething blue light, beating like a heart. Not a heart. Vorgul's blood ran cold. He had seen that shade of blue before. Not in any human archive, but in the oldest, most forbidden records of his own people. Carved into the walls of the first bunker, hidden beneath layers of warning sigils, the color of the devourers, the demons that had scourged the galaxy before the Vorthak rose to power. The demons they had sworn were extinct. A low, shuddering laugh escaped Gromnock's throat, not from amusement, but from the sheer, crushing weight of realization. "We thought they were copying us," he rasped. "But they weren't. They were digging. They found what we buried." Outside, the human ship completed its transformation, and the galaxy remembered why it had once feared the color blue section Fae. As in the dark, the silence on the Vorthak command deck was absolute. Vorgul's claws dug into the armrests of his command throne, the reinforced alloy groaning under the pressure. His secondary eyelids flicked shut, then open again, as if hoping the nightmare before him would resolve into anything else. But the human vessel remained, its transformation complete. It was no longer a ship, it was a harbinger. The sleek, predatory curves of its hull had split open like the carapace of some deep space leviathan, revealing layers of organic machinery beneath, rib-like struts of blackened alloy, pulsing veins of coolant that glowed an eerie radioactive blue, and at its core, that wound, like heart pulsed, sending waves of light cascading through the ship's structure in slow rhythmic bursts. Gromnock's data console flickered, its holographic displays scrambling as if recoiling from the sight. His claws trembled over the controls, the normally precise movements of a master scientist reduced to the jerky twitches of a prey animal frozen in terror. "Energy readings off the scale," he whispered. "Not just power output. The signature is," Vorgul didn't need the analysis. He could feel it. The same primal atavistic dread that had been coded into his species' DNA since the first purge. The fear of something older than stars. The humans had not simply found the Devourer's technology. They had understood it, and worse, they had improved it. A proximity alert shrieked through the command deck. The human ship's weapon arrays, if they could even be called that anymore, were activating. Not the crude, predictable systems the Vorthak had mocked in their earlier encounters. These were something else entirely. Tendrils of blue energy unspooled from the vessel's flanks, lashing out into the void like the seeking appendages of some colossal deep-sea predator. Where they passed, space itself warped, the fabric of reality distorting invisible ripples. Gromnock's voice was a broken thing. "I've weaponized entropy." On the main display, the human vessel's comms flickered to life. No formal hail, no demands for surrender, just a single, looping transmission. A human face, half-shadowed, eyes gleaming with reflected starlight. Commander Janet Torres. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't anything. Her gaze was fixed on something beyond the screen, beyond the Vorthak, beyond reason. And when she spoke, her voice was layered, not with the crude distortion of a comm system, but with something deeper, something older. "You should have looked harder at your own archives," she said. "We did." The transmission cut. The blue light flared, and the galaxy screamed. Section. Fae. Newton's wrath. The Vorthak command. Hub shuddered as if the universe itself had taken a breath and held it. The blue tendrils of energy lashing from the human vessel did not dissipate. They coiled, wrapping around the fabric of space like serpents constricting prey. Gromnock's claws dug into the console, his neural tendrils flickering in erratic bursts. The readings made no sense. The energy signatures defied known physics. And yet, the humans had not just harnessed them, they had aimed them. Vorgul's mandibles twitched, his armored carapace vibrating with the subsonic hum of the ship's failing stabilizers. His mind, trained for war across 100 battlefronts, struggled to reconcile what he was seeing. The human ship, Indomitable, their records had named it, was not merely a vessel. It was a statement, a relic of something older than their archives, older than their myths, and it was awake. On the main display, the rippling distortion intensified. The blue light pulsed once, twice, then detonated in a silent eruption. No sound carried in the void, but the effect was visceral. Space folded. The Vorthak destroyer Chalice of Dominion, pride of the 7th Fleet, twisted like wet parchment. Its silver-purple hull, forged from military-grade alloys, meant to withstand stellar bombardments, wrinkled inward. The ship did not break. It did not shatter. It simply ceased to be straight. Gromnock's voice was a whisper. They're bending gravity, not warping, not manipulating, commanding it. The human vessel's railguns had been a warning. The plasma lances, a demonstration. But this was something else. This was the kind of power the Vorthak had only theorized in their most forbidden research vaults. The kind of power that had once scoured entire systems from existence, and the humans had declassified it. Vorgel's secondary heart pounded, his blood running cold as the tactical display updated. The Indomitable was moving, not with the sluggish thrust of conventional drives, but in jagged, impossible increments, as if it were stepping between points in space. Each jump left behind a wake of distorted light, a ghostly afterimage that lingered like a scar. Then the transmission came again. Commander Torres' face filled the screen, her expression unchanged. The same hollow stare, the same terrible certainty. You called us primitive, she said. Her voice was still layered, still wrong, as if something beneath her skin was speaking too. You laughed at our ships, our weapons, our crude understanding of the cosmos. A flicker of movement behind her. Captain Stephen Kim, clad in armor that seemed less like a suit and more like an exoskeleton of dormant fury. His eyes were locked on the feed, unblinking. But you forgot one thing, Torres continued. Newton's third law. The screen went black. The Indomitable's engines flared. The universe punched back. The Vorthak fleet had been arranged in perfect formation, a wall of silver-purple, might meant to intimidate lesser species into submission. But the humans did not submit. They did not retreat. They accelerated. The Indomitable struck the lead battleship like a god's hammer. No projectile, no energy beam, just raw, unfiltered momentum. The impact did not crumple the Vorthak vessel. It disintegrated it, the force of the collision propagating through the hull in a wave of obliterated metal and screaming atmosphere. Secondary explosions rippled down the formation as debris became shrapnel. Shrapnel became shrapnel, and the void itself seemed to recoil from the violence. Vorgel's ship rocked, alarms shrieking. The tactical display was a storm of red sigils, each one a dying vessel. Gromnock was murmuring now, his voice trembling. They didn't build that ship. They dug it up. And then, as if in answer, the Indomitable's weapons array activated in full. Not to fire, but to sing. A harmonic resonance pulsed from its core, a frequency that made the Vorthak's bones vibrate. The soundless tone spread, and where it touched, Vorthak's system screamed. Shields collapsed like glass under a hammer. Engines stuttered and died. Communications dissolved into static. The humans had not just brought a weapon to this fight, they had brought a reckoning. And as the Indomitable turned its gaze toward the Vorthak command ship, Vorgel realized the galaxy hadn't been wrong to fear the demons in their myths. It had been wrong to think the demons were gone. Section Fe. The manual override the resonance still hummed through the bones of the Vorthak command ship, a phantom vibration that refused to fade. Vorgel's claws dug into the armrests of his command throne, the metal groaning under the pressure. Across the bridge, his officers moved like creatures trapped in a nightmare. Jerky, uncoordinated, Their spines rigid with shock, the Indomitable loomed on the view screen, its silhouette now haloed by the dying light of a dozen Vorthak warships. Gromnock's voice was a rasp, barely audible over the groaning of the ship's failing systems. They're not just using the weapon, they're conducting it. Vorgel's secondary eyelids flicked shut for a fraction of a second, a reflexive gesture of disbelief. The humans had not simply reactivated some ancient killing machine. They had mastered it. The realization was a blade twisting in his gut. On the screen, the Indomitable's hull pulsed with that same eerie silver-purple energy the Vorthak themselves used. But where their technology was harsh, utilitarian, the human vessel's glow was alive, shifting like liquid fire. It wasn't just a weapon, it was a predator. And it was hunting. Inside the Indomitable, Commander Janet Torres stood at the heart of the storm. The resonance chamber thrummed around her, its walls alive with spiraling sigils that had not been seen in millennia. The air smelled of ozone and something older, something metallic and sharp, like the scent of blood in the void. Captain Stephen Kim's voice crackled over the comm. Shields on their command vessel are down, engines offline, they're dead in the water. Torres didn't answer immediately. Her fingers hovered over the manual override console, a relic of a war fought before humans had even walked upright. The controls were not designed for her hands, the grooves too deep, the angles all wrong. But she had learned, they all had, because the archives hadn't just held blueprints. They had held warnings. Vorgel's ship shuddered again, a fresh wave of system failures rippling through its circuits. The tactical display flickered, then died, plunging the bridge into emergency lighting. The violet glow of failing power cores painted the crew in jagged shadows. Gromnock was hunched over a console, his claws moving frantically. Dive locked onto our command frequency. They're not just jamming us, they're listening. A cold weight settled in Vorgel's chest. The humans weren't just attacking, they were learning. Every transmission, every failed countermeasure, every desperate order, they were absorbing it all. And then the Indomitable moved. Not with the sluggishness of a warship, but with the precision of a blade. It pivoted, its prow aligning perfectly with the Vorthak command vessel. The resonance deepened, the soundless tone becoming a physical pressure against Vorgel's skull. Gromnock's voice was hollow. They're going for the core. Torres exhaled slowly. The override console glowed under her fingertips, the sigils responding to her touch as if they had been waiting for her. Kim's voice was tight. Orders, Commander. She didn't hesitate. Manual override. Full activation. The Indomitable's core flared, its energy signature spiking in a way that made every Vorthak sensor within 100 kilometers scream in protest. The resonance shifted, no longer a hum but a roar, a sound that bypassed ears and vibrated directly in the marrow. The Indomitable fired, not with projectiles, not with plasma, but with a beam of pure distilled annihilation. The Vorthak command ship's shields, already crippled, offered no resistance. The beam struck the core, and for a single suspended moment, the universe held its breath. Then the core detonated, not in fire, not in light, but in silence. A perfect sphere of nothingness erupted from the impact point, swallowing sound, light, even the debris of the shattered vessel. The Vorthak who had once crewed it were simply gone, erased so thoroughly that not even their atoms remained. Torres watched, her reflection ghostly in the console's glow. The galaxy had called them demons. Now they had answered. The silence lingered like a held breath. The Indomitable hung in the void, its monstrous silhouette framed by the expanding sphere of annihilation where the Vorthak command ship had once been. The beam had not merely destroyed, it had unmade. No wreckage, no radiation, just an absence, a hole punched into reality itself. On the bridge, Commander Janet Torres exhaled, slow and controlled. Her reflection in the darkened console was pale, her jaw set. She had known what the weapon would do. She had read the reports, seen the simulations. But theory was nothing compared to the visceral horror of watching an entire warship, and the hundreds of beings inside it, vanish as if they had never existed. Across the void, the remaining Vorthak vessels recoiled. Their formations, once rigid and disciplined, fractured into chaos. The silver-purple energy signatures of their drives flared erratically as they scrambled to reposition, their brutalist hulls twisting in maneuvers that spoke of desperation rather than strategy. Torres could almost hear their panic. She didn't need to. The indomitable sensors painted the picture clearly. Vorthak comms were a storm of overlapping transmissions, their normally clipped, militaristic language dissolving into something raw. The kind of primal terror that came from realizing the predator you had hunted was, in truth, the apex. A flicker of movement on the tactical display drew her eye. One of the Vorthak heavy cruisers, designated Dreadfang, was breaking formation, its massive engines burning at full thrust. Not toward the indomitable, Torres' lips thinned. She had expected this. The Vorthak were warriors, yes, but they were not fools. They understood annihilation when they saw it. She turned to her tactical officer, locked secondary batteries on the Dreadfang, a pause. Then, softly, "Mom," Torres didn't look away from the screen. "They don't get to run." Aboard the Dreadfang, High Commander Vorgel watched the tactical feed with mounting dread. The human warship was tracking them, not with the monstrous primary weapon that remained silent, its aperture dark, but with the dozens of smaller emplacements studding its armored flanks. Railgun turrets, plasma lances, missile pods, all swiveling in unison. All aimed at him, Vorgel's crest of spines flattened against his skull, a reflexive gesture of submission his species had not needed in millennia. His claws flexed against the command console, the dark steel groaning under the pressure. "They mean to make an example of us," he growled. His second, in command, Gromnak, did not respond. The scientist's violet eyes were locked on the sensor readouts, his voice hollow. "That weapon, it shouldn't exist. The energy signature, it defies every known law of focus." "Gromnak," Vorgel snarled, but the scientist wasn't listening. His gaze had shifted to the archival displays, where ancient texts scrolled across the screen, texts from the before. Time, the era of the Devourers. His voice dropped to a whisper. They called them demons. The indomitable fired, not the primary weapon, not the world. Ender, just its secondaries. A storm of railgun slugs tore through the Dreadfang's weakened shields, punching through its armored hull like paper. Plasma lances seared across its flanks, melting gunmetal plating into molten slag. Missiles streaked in, their warheads detonating not in fire, but in cascading electromagnetic pulses that fried every unshielded system aboard. The Dreadfang didn't explode. It crippled, engines sputtering, weapons dead, life support failing. Torres watched the dying ship drift, her expression unreadable. The galaxy had laughed at human ships, called them crude, unrefined. Now, they would learn. Crude did not mean weak, and humanity had never needed elegance to kill. Section Fae, the galaxy's new nightmare, the Dreadfang hung in the void like a gutted beast, its silver-purple hull flickering with dying energy. Vorgel's claws dug into the command throne as the last of his ship's systems failed. The air stank of scorched metal and ionized plasma, the scent of defeat thick in his nostrils. His mind reeled. This wasn't war. This was butchery. The humans hadn't just beaten them. They had humiliated them. Their weapons, their tactics, their contempt for the Vorthak's so-called superiority. The Indomitable hadn't even bothered to finish them off. It had left the Dreadfang adrift, a broken carcass floating in the dark. Gromnak staggered onto the bridge, his exoskeleton flickering with damage. His voice was a rasp, barely audible over the groaning of the dying ship. They knew. Vorgel turned. The scientist's data, Slate glowed in his trembling claws, displaying ancient glyphs, records from the before time. The era of the Devourers. The text spoke of a species that had once scourged the galaxy, a race of monsters who fought not for territory, not for resources, but for the sheer joy of conquest. They had called them demons, and now they had returned. Aboard the Indomitable, Captain Stephen Kim watched the crippled Vorthak vessel through the tactical display. His fingers hovered over the firing controls, one command, and the Dreadfang would be reduced to atoms. Torres' voice cut through the silence. "Stand down." Kim hesitated. "I'd burn Earth to cinders if they had the chance." Torres didn't look away from the screen. "They won't get the chance." Her voice was ice. The Vorthak had come expecting prey. They had found predators instead. Vorgel's claws clenched. The humans had let them live. That was the true horror. Not their weapons, not their ships, their mercy. Because mercy meant they weren't afraid. And if they weren't afraid, what did that make the Vorthak? The answer curdled in his gut. The galaxy had laughed at human ships. Now it would learn to fear them. The silence in the Dreadfang's war room was thick enough to choke on. Vorgel sat motionless in his command throne, the violet glow of the tactical displays casting jagged shadows across his armored face. The data streams flickered, damage reports, casualty lists, energy depletion warnings, but his eyes remained fixed on the single frozen image dominating the central holoscreen. The Indomitable, it hung in the void like a blackened claw, its angular hull still radiating heat from the battle. The humans had not even bothered to power down their weapons. Their railgun batteries remained charged, their plasma lances humming at standby. A silent promise: we could end you whenever we choose. Gromnock stood beside him, his spined fingers trembling as they scrolled through the recovered archives. The ancient texts shimmered in the air, their glyphs pulsing with the same silver-purple hue as Vorthak blood. "The Devourers," he whispered, his voice cracking. "The ones who came before the First Empire, the ones we thought were myth." Vorgel's claws flexed. He had heard the legends. Every Vorthak child had. Stories of a nameless scourge that had once burned across the stars, leaving only dead worlds in their wake. A species so relentless, so hungry, that the ancient empires had purged all records of them rather than risk their return. And now, they had a name. The realization settled into his bones like radiation sickness. Across the chamber, the surviving bridge crew huddled in clusters, their spines flattened in submission. Some still bled from ruptured membranes, their violet ichor staining the deck. None of them spoke. None of them dared. The humans had not just defeated them, they had humiliated them. Vorgel's mandibles twitched. He had led the Dreadfang into battle, expecting a slaughter, just not this kind. The human ship had moved like nothing he had ever seen. No elegant maneuvers, no calculated retreats, just raw, brutal efficiency. It had taken hits that would have crippled a Vorthak dreadnought and laughed. And then there were the weapons. Gromnock's voice was hollow. "Their armor, it's not just reinforced, it's alive." Vorgel turned. The scientist pointed to the scans, his claws trembling. "Nanite, forged, self-repairing. It adapts to energy signatures, mid-combat. That's why our lances failed. By the third volley, the hull had already evolved resistance." A cold knot tightened in Vorgel's thorax. That was impossible. No species had ever breached adaptive armor technology. The energy requirements alone were beyond even the most advanced civilizations. And yet, the humans had not just achieved it, they had weaponized it. Gromnock continued, his voice dropping to a whisper, "And their soldiers." The holoscreen flickered, pulling up recovered footage from the boarding drones. Vorgel's breath caught. Human exo-troopers moved through the Dreadfangs, corridors like shadows, their armored forms flickering in and out of visibility. Their weapons didn't just kill, they unmade. Plasma blades sliced through bulkheads as if they were mist. Grenades detonated in silent bursts of distorted gravity, crushing entire squads into pulp. And then there were the eyes, cold, calculating. Vorgel's claws dug into the armrests. The archives had described them perfectly. They do not rage. They do not scream. They hunt in silence, and when they kill, they do not smile. A shiver ran through the crew. The humans had not just matched the Vorthak in battle. They had surpassed them, and the most terrifying part, they had held back. Vorgel's gaze drifted back to the Indomitable, hanging in the void like a promise. The galaxy had laughed at human ships. Now, it would learn to kneel. The silence on the Dreadfang's bridge was absolute. Vorgel's claws remained embedded in the command throne's armrests, the alloy groaning under the pressure. His secondary heart pounded in sync with the ship's failing power core. Each pulse, a hammer, strike against his ribs. The holographic displays flickered, casting jagged violet shadows across the faces of his crew. Faces that had once been hardened by centuries of conquest, now slack with something far worse than fear. Recognition. The human boarding parties had breached the final bulkhead. Their footsteps were silent, their weapons humming with restrained lethality. The last of the Vorthak defense drones lay in smoking ruins, their silver-purple plating peeled open like the carapaces of dead insects. Gromnock's voice was a whisper, his spines flattened against his skull. They move like the Karvash. The name sent a ripple through the bridge. The Karvash, the ancient demons of Vorthak scripture, the nightmare that had once driven their ancestors to the brink of extinction. The archives spoke of them in hushed tones, creatures of impossible precision, who fought not with fury, but with the cold inevitability of a collapsing star. And now they stood outside the door. Vorgel's mandibles twitched. He had seen the human warship schematics. He had watched it dismantle the Dreadfang's sister vessels with contemptuous ease. But this was different. The humans had not just built a weapon. They had become one. The final bulkhead exploded inward in a storm of molten metal. The exotroopers stepped through, their armor black as the void between galaxies, their visors glowing with the same eerie blue as the Indomitable's railgun capacitors. They did not speak. They did not taunt. They simply advanced, their movements synchronized like the gears of some unfathomable machine. One of them, taller than the rest, its pauldrons etched with the insignia of a human skull wreathed in lightning, tilted its head. Vorgel knew, without needing to see beneath the helmet, that the creature was studying him. Commander Torres, the human raised a gauntleted hand. The Vorthak bridge crew tensed, their weapons trembling in their grips. No barrage of plasma fire, no monomolecular blade slicing through flesh, just a single deliberate gesture, a deactivation signal. Outside the viewports, the Indomitable's weapon arrays powered down. The targeting locks disengaged. The void, which had been alive with the scream of dying ships, fell silent. Gromnock's breath hitched. There, standing down, Vorgel's mind reeled. This was not how the Karvash behaved. The archives had been clear. The demons showed no mercy. They burned worlds to ash and left no survivors. The human commander's voice crackled over the comms, calm, almost amused. You thought we were the monsters from your stories. A pause. We're not. The words hung in the air like a verdict. Vorgel's gaze flickered to the tactical display. The human fleet had not just defeated the Vorthak armada, they had outplayed it. Every move, every counterstrike had been calculated to dismantle without total annihilation. A sickening realization settled in his gut. The humans had never needed to declassify their ships to prove their strength. They had done it for one reason only, to show the galaxy what happened when it laughed at them. Now, they were offering a hand instead of a blade. The punchline to a joke the Vorthak had never understood. Vorgel's claws retracted. For the first time in his life, the High Commander of the Vorthak Armada bowed his head, not in surrender, in respect.